My turn.
What's yours say, Cece?
Celeste, she's just a ball of energy. Call her Rampage, because she's just always, she's got two speeds, go or she's sleeping. And
Cece, Chris is laying with her in her bed. Like, we literally, it's 6:30. They go to bed at 6:30.
she's always a troublemaker. She's always the one like jumping off things, just yelling at you. And
Diva, Princess, Mini Boss, Rockstar, Multitask. Good job.
But Celeste has definitely got her mom's personality to where she's always just gung-ho, ready to go.
And they're telling you to honk. Hashem said honk and get them out of your way.
Shanann documented her life on social media.
And she got scared, so I wanted to show her so she knew not to be afraid of it. So now that it's done and it's just pouring, we can go back to bed. So Mommy's got work to do.
The things, and Bella, she's the more calm, cautious, mothering type. And she's more like me, she's more calm.
I don't want to go back to bed.
It's time for bed now. We gotta hurry up and go to sleep, because the more sleep we get, the faster we get to North Carolina.
I mean, well, her and the girls were gone for 6 weeks, visiting family and stuff.
Shanann and the children, Celeste, 3, and Bella, 4, recently spent 6 weeks at the home of her parents in North Carolina, while her husband stayed behind in Colorado.
The FBI has joined the search for a mother who disappeared in Colorado this week with her 2 young daughters. 34-year-old Shannon Watts is about 4 months pregnant. She was last seen with her daughters, ages 4 and 3, on Monday in Frederick, Colorado, north of Denver.
Mommy, can I go play out there?
No, you can't. It's thunder and lightning, sweetheart.
Chris Watts has been arrested after police say he confessed to murdering his pregnant wife and their 2 daughters. The 33-year-old Frederick man was booked into Weld County Jail in the early hours this morning. Watts' family was reported missing on Monday, August 13th.
They said punch it.
I felt pretty good. I felt really smooth.
Breaking news overnight in Colorado. The husband of a missing pregnant woman is under arrest this morning, and her family says she and their 2 young daughters were murdered. 34-year-old Shanann Watts, 4-year-old Bella, and 3-year-old Celeste were last seen on Monday in Frederick, just north of Denver.
CBS Denver station, that's KCNC, reports that Christopher Watts admitted to killing his wife and children and agreed to take investigators to their bodies later today. He is expected to be charged this afternoon. Jerika Duncan is following this unfolding horrible story. Jerika, good morning.
Good morning. Shanann Watts left behind her purse, phone, and keys when she and her 2 young daughters vanished. Shannon's husband, Christopher Watts, spoke to several local news stations after their disappearance, and he said he just wanted his family home.
The FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation got involved Wednesday. Authorities were seen searching the family's suburban Frederick, Colorado home.
When I witnessed him with the girls, he was this just a very loving, doting father. Would take him in a little wagon, and they were so cute, and you could just tell there was so much love there. And we admire that because it's so. You just don't see it that much these days. But that's the hardest part for me to really put my head around. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, go.
That.
Go.
CBS Denver station KCNC reported late Wednesday that Christopher Watts allegedly confessed to killing his wife and daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. He is now being held at the Weld County Jail.
I called her and texted her several times.
Nicole Utoff says she dropped Shanann Watts off at her home around 2 a.m. Monday morning following a work trip. Later that day, when she didn't return calls, Utoff notified police. After her disappearance, Christopher Watts denied having an argument with his wife.
Ms. Watts, why did you kill your wife and 2 children?
Mr. Watts, did you confess?
That this pregnant mom and her 2 little girls were killed inside the family's home in Frederick. Now, we know at least one of the bodies was found in an Anadarko oil and gas field. They are still searching for the little girls tonight. Investigators with the FBI, CBI, and Frederick police have been working around the clock since Monday to find pregnant Shanann Watts and her 2 little girls, Cece and Bella. But everything changed late Wednesday night.
Chris Watts was taken into custody and was transported to the Weld County Jail just after 11:30 p.m. last night.
Sources tell Denver 7 Shanann's husband, Chris, confessed to killing his own family and then hiding their bodies. Just 24 hours after he went in front of our cameras, detectives say they found Shanann's body on Anadarko property, one of the state's largest oil and gas companies where Chris was employed.
Shanann Watts, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste were last seen on Monday. Now here's some video from overnight. The husband's truck has been towed away from their home and police have been bringing out bags of potential evidence. The husband, Chris Watts, had just spoken with local media this week before he was arrested. At that time, he said that he had an emotional conversation with his wife and then she vanished. Well, after hearing that he'd been arrested, people gathered outside the house and put a cross in the yard.
Chris Watts' attorney is asking for DNA samples to be taken from the 2 girls. What the defense wants to do with the samples is not known. The paperwork also notes that the children were found in an oil tank filled with crude oil and had been there for several days.
They were always hugging or holding hands or kissing, and
descriptions like these of Chris and Shanann Watts
they had the perfect family.
Are the only way Nick and Amanda Thayer remember the 2 together.
They were family.
So it was an easy decision this week.
It's unreal.
To offer to have Chris stay at their home in Thornton.
I just hope that this kind of puts it out there.
While police searched for Shanann and her daughters.
Had we had any inclination that we thought he was involved at all, no way would I have let him in my house with my wife and kid.
Her daughter just...
Nick and Amanda's 5-year-old daughter...
loved them so much.
Was just as close to 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste.
How do I tell you that your best friend's gone? Like, I don't know.
You want more pie in that face? You want more pie in that face? All right, now say goodbye. This personality.
Watts, did you confess?
Chris Watts listened as a judge read him his rights, uttering few words. Thursday, police believe they found the body of 34-year-old Shanann Watts on petroleum company property where her husband used to work. Later, finding bodies they believe are the couple's 2 daughters nearby.
You killed your wife and 2 children.
Today, 33-year-old Chris Watts reportedly confessed, "I killed them all."
Shanann's mom called me this morning to make sure we had Dieter and to make sure she wanted our word that we were going to take good care of him because Dieter's the last thing they have, and they want to take him home.
Say hi.
Hello.
Shanann, 4-year-old Bella, and 3-year-old Celeste vanished Monday. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant, missing a doctor's appointment. Watts admitting he and Shanann had a disagreement early that day.
I feel so stupid, like we were duped by one of our good friends.
Nicholas and Amanda Thayer were close friends of the Watts. Before Chris's arrest, standing by his side.
During no time in the 48 to 72 hours we were with him did he ever show remorse.
Right?
He never once cried. Which I guess is now a red flag.
I know. He was worried with how he's being looked at. You know what I mean? Like, he was worried with what people were saying.
Very concerned with how he was being perceived.
Yeah, he was, and I didn't really think much of it until the FBI agent was like, sounds like he was looking for ideas.
Our affiliate Denver 7 says the girls' bodies were found concealed in oil and gas tanks. The petroleum company where Watts works says it fired him on Wednesday, the same day he was arrested.
We want to bring in former FBI agent Brad Garrett, part of our team here. And Brad, you've studied so many of these interviews with people who then turn suspects. This husband had just been pleading for his wife's return hours before this reported confession, and I wanted you to take a look and see what you made of this.
Okay. I just want them back. I just want them to come back.
What do you see immediately there?
Okay, so you have a guy that's using the word, I want her to come back. Well, that's really sort of telling me, David, that he knows exactly where she is. You know, want is an interesting word to use. So you get the feeling like he wants to make an impression on us, but we know he's really lying.
And it was what he said, Brad, in particular about the children that stood out to me, talking about the dinner hour. Here it is.
Last night, during when they usually eat dinner, it was just like I miss them. I miss telling them, hey, you got to eat that or you're not going to get your dessert.
Well, if you look at I miss, it almost sounds like in the past tense. That he obviously knows what has happened. But the important thing in this interview, David, he really focuses on himself and what the police are doing. He doesn't mention his wife that's pregnant, that's missing. It's really all about me and about what the police are doing.
And right down to his body language, Brad. His arms are crossed on that front porch.
His arms are crossed. He looks down a couple times. You know, and he talks in generalities. When he tries to fill in that blank between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., he doesn't give you any information. That's very telling.
It's just heartbreaking when you think about the pregnant mom and those two little girls. Brad, thanks for helping us to break it down.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Chris Watts had little to say in a Colorado courtroom this afternoon. Wednesday night, the body of his pregnant wife, Shanann, was discovered on the property of one of his work sites. In the latest court motions filed today, Chris Watts' attorney is asking for DNA samples to be taken from the two girls. What the defense wants to do with the samples is not known.
Home videos show what seemed to be a loving and happy all-American family.
I don't feel like I work because I love what I do.
The couple had serious money troubles. Court papers obtained by Inside Edition show they declared bankruptcy in 2015 with $449,000 in debts and just $864 in the bank.
My youngest was 6 months old and my oldest was 2. I was nursing. I was extremely exhausted. On top of that, I was working 2 jobs because I financially needed to.
Gene West is a former FBI behavioral science expert.
When he realizes what he's done, that his story is unraveling. And that's probably his main concern during the course of that interview.
We defended him on social media. We really had no idea that he was capable of doing something like we.
Well, Shanann's brother is expressing his fury over the murders. May he rot in hell. He killed my pregnant sister and my 2 nieces. We just found out she was pregnant with a baby boy and his name was going to be Nico. This sonogram image with the message, I love Chris. He's the best dad us girls could ask for. Just days ago, she posted this photo of her baby bump. 15 weeks. Baby is the size of an orange. The Watts family was recently profiled in a magazine published by the weight loss supplement company Shanann worked for. On social media, Shanann boasted about earning all expenses paid vacations to exotic destinations, while her husband often stayed home with the kids.
I get to hear the baby's heartbeat and see how he or she was doing.
Atkinson says when she alerted Shanann's husband, Chris, he seemed unconcerned that his wife and daughters, 3-year-old Celeste and 4-year-old Bella, were missing.
I love you, girl. I got the baby a hug.
You want to give the baby a hug?
Shanann was last seen by a colleague who dropped her off from a work trip at 2 a.m. Monday. Family, friends, and the entire Frederick, Colorado police force searched around the clock.
34-year-old Shanann Watts' marriage was crumbling.
We don't know if he was unfaithful to his wife. A family friend said that the wife had confided in her. She was concerned that her husband might be having an affair, but she didn't really have any evidence to support that.
He has no game.
The mom was found in an open part of a field, and then her children were found nearby. We've reported that the children were found inside some oil tanks. There's concern that he might have been doing it to try and mask the smell. Because those tanks had a lot of oil in them, it might be difficult to smell a body that was decaying.
Their bodies were found on Thursday at an oil field where Chris once worked. Shanann was found in a shallow grave. The children were found submerged in tanks filled with crude oil.
What we know about where the bodies were found, Anderson, we have some new information on that. He says that he loaded all 3 bodies into his truck and took them to this oil company where he used to work. He was actually fired the same day he was arrested. He was also given a map by authorities. According to the affidavit, he was able to pinpoint on the map where the bodies were. Shanann Watts was found in a shallow grave. The 2 girls were found nearby in oil tanks where police say their bodies had been submerged for 4 days.
So I just don't understand. If he's claiming he killed her to protect or in a rage, whatever, why would he have hidden the bodies?
That's what doesn't make sense. I mean, we know that his team has asked for DNA samples to be taken from the girls' necks. They asked the judge that, possibly to prove that it was the mother, not the father, who did this, but that request was denied. But it doesn't make any sense. You'd think somebody would have called authorities, called police.
You wanted you confess 3 counts of first-degree murder. Do you understand that? Yes, sir.
At the family's home, neighbors have created a makeshift memorial to the slain mother and her daughters.
The story hit close to home. You know, we're from the community, and I think that we're all just trying to pay our respects in the most respectful way.
No inclination of where she is.
Now, all week, people have asked me about my thoughts on that interview, and my answer to that question is this. As a journalist, we have to give up the right to have a public opinion about things. I knocked on that door Tuesday and approached the interview like I do every single day, with compassion. Let that man tell his story. It's not my job to judge. I am observant, yes, but judgmental, never. Every week I interview people going through hard times or what seems like hard times. What I'm not used to, though, is standing in someone's house, shaking their hand to find out that 2 days later, that same person would be arrested for the murder of his wife and kids. And while that interview is now ingrained in my head in the worst possible way, it's nothing compared to what the town of Frederick is going through right now, and definitely not comparable to how the friends and family, Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, feel right now.
Happened in a rural suburb 30 miles north of Denver in a town of about 8,500 people. The family was well known by many in the area who understandably right now are at a loss for words. That's why hundreds of those very folks saddened by the deaths of Shanann Watts and her 2 little girls, Bella and Celeste, showed up for a very emotional candlelight vigil. The crowd gathered outside the family's home, the scene where investigators believe husband and father, Christopher Watts, killed his family. They, like the family's babysitter, are trying to make sense of the unthinkable.
He's a monster who let us comfort him and felt absolutely no remorse for what he's done. God, I miss him.
That's uncomprehendable to me or to anyone in this community. It just doesn't happen. And it did right here.
Good morning. Chris Watts is in jail. Now, his wife, Shanann Watts, was pregnant, and she was supposed to have a gender reveal party this past weekend, but instead her family is planning a funeral.
Hey guys, so I'm here with my little munchkins. Hi.
For those who knew Shanann Watts and her daughters Bella and Celeste, the unanswered questions are almost as painful as the grief.
The hardest part about it all is when you're closer with the family, it's the why.
Today, from his jail cell, Chris Watts will learn the official charges he faces after reportedly confessing to murdering his wife Shanann and their daughters, 3-year-old Celeste and 4-year-old Bella. In new court documents, investigators say his children were discovered on the oil field where he worked. Celeste and Bella found in a well filled with crude oil for several days. The documents recommending DNA swabs on the children's necks, raising the possibility they were strangled. Shanann was buried nearby in a shallow grave.
I can't believe that they're gone. I can't believe that Chris would do.
No, he wouldn't do anything. And then I seen his interview and I was like, oh my God, something's not right.
On Facebook, with emotions running high, Shanann's brother directly accused Chris Watts. "This piece of blank, may he rot in hell. He killed my pregnant sister and my 2 nieces." Police have not suggested a motive. Before his arrest, Watts told reporters that he and his wife had exchanged words.
Point did you consider the death penalty?
Way too early to have that conversation.
Why?
Because I don't have to.
The father who confessed to killing his wife and 2 daughters is expected to formally be charged today, and the friend who says she was the last to see that mother alive is speaking out now in an ABC News exclusive. Clayton Sandell is in Frederick, Colorado with the story. Good morning, Clayton.
And good morning, George. That friend says her last goodbye to Shanann Watts was right here outside the family home. But when police later arrested Chris Watts for allegedly murdering his wife and 2 daughters, she says she was not shocked.
Nicole Atkinson says she knew something wasn't right. 2 a.m. Monday, she says she drops her friend Shanann Watts at home from a late business trip.
She went inside, turned around and waved at me and shut the door.
I am Shanann's dad.
That she was on a play date, but he couldn't give us the name of the friend.
A neighbor's security camera footage adds to the mystery.
Showed Chris leaving that morning, and there was no movement in between those times of me dropping her off, Chris leaving, and then me coming back.
What does that tell you?
That there was something seriously wrong.
Investigators believe Watts, who was employed by Anadarko Petroleum, drove the bodies of his wife and girls to company property. Court documents say Shanann was found in a shallow grave, Celeste and Bella submerged in oil tanks.
I didn't want to think that they weren't coming back.
On Facebook, Shanann often posted videos of a seemingly happy family. But Atkinson says Shanann told her Chris had recently become standoffish, their marriage strained.
He wasn't being the loving Chris that he normally was. He wasn't touching or hugging or doing stuff like that.
Did she suspect he might have been cheating?
I think she entertained the idea, yes.
But she says she has no idea why Watts would allegedly kill his family. He's reportedly confessed. She says if you think a friend might be in trouble, don't hesitate to reach out.
She wanted to see the best in everybody and bring out the best in everybody. So she very much pushed you to do the things that she knew you could.
So far, there has been no word on an alleged motive. We did reach out to Chris Watts' public defender. He has not called us back. Watts has not entered a plea, but he will be back in court on Tuesday.
Shanann's father, Frank Ruzek Sr., was also at the press conference and made an emotional statement.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out to the candlelight visual and saying all your prayers. They are greatly appreciated. And keep the prayers coming.
This afternoon, my office filed formal charges against Christopher Lee Watts. 3 counts of murder in the first degree after deliberation, 2 counts of first-degree murder of a child under the age of 12 by a person in a position of trust, unlawful termination of a pregnancy in the first degree, 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. Please keep in mind that at this point, these are merely allegations. There are formal charges. However, the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
Christopher Watts appeared in court this morning wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles. The 33-year-old accused of killing his pregnant wife Shanann and their 2 daughters showed no emotions as Judge Marcelo Capcow read off his 9 felony charges.
And that crime is classified as murder in the first degree, a class 1 felony.
In an affidavit released yesterday, Watts admits he killed his pregnant wife, but says he did not kill his children. Watts admitted to having an affair with a co-worker after initially denying it. Shortly after telling his wife he wanted a separation, Watts claims he saw her on a baby monitor actively strangling Celeste. Watts told police he saw his other daughter sprawled out on her bed and blew, and then he went into a rage and ultimately strangled.
She was 15 weeks pregnant. Might that be why prosecutors are holding off to see if they really can charge this man with the murder of that unborn child in the state of Colorado?
Well, they cannot, and that apparently is a fact. Apparently, according to the laws of this particular state, you cannot charge for the unborn fetus. There's a lot of political wrangling going on at this point to see if they could change the laws moving forward. But as it stands now, and certainly this gives the legislature in that state more impetus to do that, but as of right now, they can't.
At this point, I have denied your right to bail.
Today we're learning new details about Chris Watts. That's the Colorado man accused of killing his pregnant wife and 2 young daughters.
So he now claims that his wife killed the girls. In a fit of rage, he turned on her. Avery Cotton is staying on top of this story. She joins us now with the latest on this story.
Good morning, and Watts will be in court later today to hear all of the charges he's facing. And we've learned that he says he was having an affair with his co-worker, and that's when all of this just spiraled out of control. All of this after he calmly told the world his family was missing. Now, he is formally charged with murder. The affidavit reveals police found that Watts was having an affair. The affidavit also shows Chris claimed he asked his wife for a separation. That's when he says she killed their daughters and he killed her, quote, in a rage. Prosecutors not buying Watts' explanation. According to court documents, the remains of the 3 victims were found in a Colorado oil field where Chris Watts worked. The children, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, in a well filled with crude oil. Wife Shannon in a shallow grave nearby. Watts is currently being held without bail. He is charged with a total of 9 felony accounts, including 5 counts of murder in the first degree.
Do you think he was happy to have another child?
As far as I know, Chris wanted another baby.
Friends say they were recently planning a couple's getaway.
She'd planned a trip for her and Chris to go celebrate their 8-year anniversary, which would have been this weekend.
Instead, Watts spent the anniversary in jail.
Kelly Trippi was friends with Shanann and says she doesn't believe Watts' story.
What do you think he should have done?
He should have said I did it. He should have said I'm an I'm completely a monster.
Omar, so hard to hear about this case, but still so much police work that needs to be done. What is next here?
Watts will be back in court in November. He's expected to enter a plea. But, Jeff, we still do not know if the district attorney plans to pursue the death penalty in this case.
I said, hey, I've been in law enforcement for a long time, and I know these teddy bears are probably going to get donated to somewhere. And would it be okay with you if I took them and with the smaller ones, gave them back to police departments to hand out, and then take the bigger ones and turn them into some sort of a blanket or something that we could distribute to fire departments and police departments here locally and across the nation, and just kind of, that was it.
Jeremy and Jennifer Lindstrom were with Chris, Bella, and Celeste hours before the murders. He's now listed as a potential witness in the case.
There's no way I would have thought this was the outcome.
They were just here, and they were just playing, and they didn't know, and they didn't
I didn't deserve it. I'm glad they got to have a fun day.
God, that's such a horrifying story. We know that Watts is charged with multiple counts of murder, but tell us about the punishment he may be facing.
Well, Hoda, Colorado has the death penalty. Yesterday, the DA was asked if he would pursue that death penalty, but right now he says it's just too early to tell.
I am super, super, super pumped about 2018.
On the surface, Chris and Shanann Watts had it all. Successful careers, a nice house in a tidy suburb, and 2 healthy kids with a 3rd one on the way. It's that fact that makes what happened inside their Frederick, Colorado home so stunning and so hard to understand. The only person who truly knows what happened is Chris Watts, now behind bars facing murder charges for the deaths of his pregnant wife and young daughter. Shanann Watts was first reported missing on August 13th by a friend who had dropped her off here at home after a business trip late the night before. The next day, she had missed a doctor's appointment and wasn't answering her phone. When police showed up to look for Shanann, there was no sign of her or the girls, but no sign of a crime either.
Everybody's like, well, what about the husband? What about the husband? What about the husband? And I'm like, no, like, he wouldn't do anything. And then I seen his interview and I was like, oh my God, like, something's not right.
Please bring her back. Watts told police that early that morning he told Shanann he wanted to separate. But afterwards, he says he went to work like any other day. Shanann stayed in bed. Friends never imagined Chris could be involved in the disappearance. Amanda and Nicholas Thayer even took Watts in after his family was reported missing.
He stayed the night at our house across the hall from our 5-year-old. That'll help me. He just didn't seem like the type of guy to injure a fly, let alone his entire family.
According to the arrest affidavit, 2 days later, police discovered Watts had left out a key detail, an extramarital affair with a colleague, a possibility Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson told ABC News she had privately considered. After the cheating revelation, Watts changed his story dramatically, telling police that after he told Shanann he wanted to separate, he went downstairs momentarily. When he came back up, he saw through a baby monitor in the bedroom his 4-year-old daughter Bella sprawled out on her bed in blue, and Shanann actively strangling Celeste, just 3 years old. Chris said he went into a rage and ultimately strangled Shanann to death, according to that police affidavit.
They were always so happy and always so, I never thought he would do anything to her.
Watts told police he loaded the 3 bodies into the back seat of his truck and drove 45 minutes to this secluded work site on a private ranch, accessible only by a maze of winding dirt roads. He dug a shallow grave for his wife and dumped the bodies of his daughters Bella and Celeste into an oil storage tank, where they sat for 4 days. The drone search spotted a bed sheet that matched a set found in Chris Watts' kitchen trash can.
The hardest part about it all is when you're closer with the family, it's the why. The why gets bigger. We're dumbfounded. We don't get it. Lost.
Watts' defense team requested in court to have their own DNA expert swab Shanann's fingernails, presumably to prove her involvement, but the judge denied that request.
I can see how they would want to go down that road from an evidentiary standpoint. I think that it's going to be very difficult, though, if these children had been submerged in oil, that you would be able to recover anything that's usable from out of that environment.
Watts' initial denial is vaguely similar to the Scott Peterson case, the man convicted in California of killing his pregnant wife after joining search efforts for her body 15 years ago. A detective who worked on that investigation says Watts' story doesn't add up.
To think that a wife would kill her children after her husband said that he wants to leave is pretty far out. I could see her wanting to kill him, though.
Beneath the surface, cracks in the perfectly curated Facebook image of the family started to appear years earlier. They went through bankruptcy in 2015 and were sued by their homeowners association for $1,500. Watts has been fired from his job in the oil industry, but back in 2012, he may have had other aspirations. For 1 semester, he took classes at a North Carolina community college and posted this video of his apparent assignment, a presentation about relationship deterioration and repair.
Always disclose your feelings. Don't keep things bottled up because it will later come back
to bite you. And in conclusion, I can say that relationships are hard, but they're worth it in the end.
Somehow, 6 years after lecturing about the value of relationships, Chris Watts sat emotionless in a courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the hands and feet while a judge read the 9 felony charges against him for murdering his entire family, tampering with their bodies, and terminating his wife's pregnancy with the baby boy they had already named Nico. Back at the now empty Watts home, there is still a steady trickle of friends, neighbors, and complete strangers coming to pay their respect to a family that could have been anyone's.
It's just sad. Daddy-daughter relationships are something very special, so that's just really heartbreaking.
Shanann Watts did not have a will.
Important to the Rusek family that Chris Watts never be able to receive a dime from any of these murders.
And the big question is, who owns what in that house? Who it belongs to.
They had a lot of expensive things, too.
Oh, they had many expensive things in their house. Even their house was a very expensive home.
Estimated value of real estate, and it's left blank. And we think that home was somewhere in the $300, maybe $400 range, $400,000 range, if I recall.
Exactly right, yeah.
And then estimated value of personal property. Well, Shanann had to have had a lot of personal property. Her own personal things, her family mementos that the family said to us they came to get. They came to collect some of the things that were heirlooms passed down, Shanann's personal things. Look at the things in the background of all of these videos. You know, expensive things, expensive furniture and vases and picture frames and art on the wall. I mean, there's a lot of expensive stuff in there, but the estimated value of personal property is listed as?
There's nothing.
Blank. It's like she was so good about chronicling this and showing every single step of the way. This is all with Bella. I should let you know that this is all the pregnancy with Bella back in 2013. And it was July through October. And eventually Bella was born December 17th in 2013.
Look at all the social media that they have out there. Nowadays, a lot of people do have their personal lives out there for everyone to see, right? And you can sometimes tell pretty quickly, based on people's daily or weekly posts, how their relationships are doing, right? You know, and some people during a fight will broadcast that out to their family and friends and maybe even to the public.
She needs to stop so the kids can go back to bed.
Father accused of murdering his pregnant wife and their 2 daughters will be in court today. This will be Chris Watts' last hearing before his arraignment, where he may enter a plea. He has argued his late wife killed the kids or was in the process, and then he killed her in a fit of rage. He is facing multiple first-degree murder charges.
Mr. Watts entered a plea of guilty to all 9 counts in the original complaint. Those counts include murder in the first degree after deliberation as to Shanann Watts, murder in the first degree as to Bella Watts, murder in the first degree as to Celeste Watts.
If he didn't kill the children, I want him to say so. Then that prove it.
Unlawful termination of a pregnancy as it relates to Nico Watts, and 3 counts of unlawful tampering with a deceased human body. There was a sentencing agreement that calls for the defendant to be sentenced to the Department of Corrections for the remainder of his natural life as to counts 1, 2, and 3. All of those sentences will run consecutively to one another. There's also an agreement that whatever sentence the court imposes as to count 6 will also run consecutively to counts 1 through 3. The remainder of the sentencing will be left to the discretion of the court. That sentencing will occur November 19th at 10 o'clock in the morning. The final piece of the sentencing agreement calls for the district attorney's office, myself, to agree that as a result of his plea of guilty, that he will not face the death penalty.
Do you think he was coerced at all?
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea what the public, to me, that all they wanted to do was just save his life. Just save his life. Well, save his life and life in prison, to me, there's no difference.
I know that there are going to be a lot of questions about that, so let me address that right up front. Present here in the room with us today is Frank Rusek, Sandra Rusek, and Frank Rusek Jr., Shanann's brother, mom and dad. Mr. Wren and I flew out to North Carolina about 3 weeks ago and spent quite a bit of time with the Rusick family talking about the state of the death penalty in Colorado, the realities of the death penalty. We explained to them the extraordinary delays that currently exist in the state of Colorado as the result of, in part, the actions of our current governor. We discussed the fact that an individual by the name of Nathan Dunlap was convicted and sentenced to death in 1996 and is still alive today. We discussed all of the possible consequences, delays, penalties, timeframes, and I hope I'm saying this accurately. I know they'll correct me if I am wrong, but they were very strongly in favor of a resolution in this case short of the death penalty. That, to me, was the most important consideration in deciding how to proceed with this case.
You know, he's going to die in prison, and there's no telling what will be done to him in prison. And I just want him to fight. I want him to not take this plea deal. I want him to plead not guilty to the children.
After this interview, the Watts are looking into different legal avenues.
However, as they know, after we had those meetings at their home in North Carolina, I came back and had meetings with all of the law enforcement partners you see standing up here today, with the supervisors in my office, in consultation with other district attorneys around the state. And to a person, the advice and suggestions that I was given was, you do what the victim's family wants you to do in this case. I don't know how I could have sat in Sandy's kitchen and asked her to commit the next 25 years of her life to the criminal justice system without any assurances that that sentence, if ever imposed, or excuse me, if ever obtained, would ever actually be imposed.
Frustrated with this attorneys here? Are you guys frustrated with the direction they may have put him through?
Yes, I am. I am absolutely frustrated.
You said that they requested that you not seek the death penalty. How did that affect your process?
I went through the same process I would have had their answer been different. I had in my mind from the day this occurred, the steps in the process that I felt like were due diligence in order to come to this decision. I don't think any elected district attorney ever wants to have to make a decision about whether or not to seek the death penalty as it relates to an individual. But when I have a family who has been so incredibly supportive and so incredibly firm in their belief that the death penalty not be sought, I don't know how I would have said to them, I'm going to do it anyway.
How early into the process was that decision made?
The decision was made about 4 days ago.
Have you been able to see him?
No.
We got to see him one time. That was that Monday right before the plea deal. That Monday
Right
night.
before the plea deal, and that was it.
How was the family how did the family react when you told them about this decision?
I think there were a lot of emotions that went through their mind, and again, they're going to throw something at me if I say something inappropriate. I think that there was a combination of relief, extraordinary sadness that we ever had to have that conversation in the first place. And I can only say that I hope there is a sense of closure. I know that that will never be fully realized because obviously the tragedy that sits before us today is the loss of 4 beautiful lives. And no matter what happens today, no matter what happens at a sentencing hearing down the road, we can't get them back. Sandy said it very, very poignantly to me. She said he made the choice to take those lives. I do not want to be in a position of making the choice to take his. And so that's about as firmly as she could have said it to me, and that was very compelling to all of us as we were talking about how to proceed on this case.
Chris Watts first said Shanann actually killed the 2 little girls. What was his story when he changed his mind? And were they killed before Shanann got home?
How did he kill her? How did he say he did it when he stabbed?
He said he did the same thing that she did to him, that she did to the girls.
Carol, I don't know the answer to that question. We talked a lot about whether we would require him to come forward and give us what we believe to be a complete, accurate, and truthful statement. I think all of those who were involved never truly believed that he would give us an accurate statement. What I can tell you most affirmatively today by what happened in the courtroom is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shanann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie has been correct.
Well, Shanann, I mean, you have to get to know her to be around her. But
Her family's attorney sent us this statement. Their false statements, however hurtful and inaccurate, will never alter the truth about Shanann and will never alter the truth about the crimes committed by their son. Her memory and reputation deserves to be protected, and her family is fully prepared to do so.
The spotlight shines directly where it belongs, on him. But what he needs to understand is he will be serving 3 consecutive life sentences plus a sentence for Nico Watts because of the acts that he committed against all 4 of them. It was important that each of those beautiful human beings be reflected in the ultimate sentence.
I spoke to a longtime friend of both Shanann and Chris who saw the interview. Out of respect of the families, he didn't want to do an on-camera interview, but said both families are hurting and just hope for the family's sake that Chris doesn't continue to fight this and go to trial.
I didn't want them just to save his life or to life in prison. I wanted them to have a defense. You know, there was a defense there.
His parents went into details about the relationship problems Shanann and Chris allegedly had, even looking at another attorney in Denver to take their son's case. But there's been some reaction about all this from Shanann's family.
Are you guys worried about some of the backlash about maybe coming out and speaking on behalf of Chris and what it might do to your guys' relationship and, you know, speaking out like this about a woman who can't defend herself right now?
The mother of Chris Watts says her son did kill his pregnant wife, Shanann, but that he did not kill their 2 young daughters. He pleaded guilty last week, and now Cindy Watts tells Denver affiliate KDVR, it's very difficult, very difficult. I can't imagine my son doing that. He couldn't have done that, unquote. Now, Cindy also said that she believes her son's plea was something coerced. She said, quote, I love my son no matter what, and I want to fight for him, and I don't want him to go down for something he didn't do, unquote.
How could a seemingly normal husband and father annihilate his entire family? For what?
It's the ultimate question. Why Chris Watts, an outwardly loving spouse and father, murdered his pregnant wife and 2 little girls.
I have no idea who gave you the right to take their lives.
After pleading guilty to murder charges, Watts faced his wife's parents during an emotional sentencing hearing.
This is the heartless one, the evil monster, who dare you take the lives of my daughter Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico.
Watts remained stoically silent.
Would you like to make a statement?
As the judge sentenced him to 5 consecutive life sentences with no possibility for parole.
This is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen.
Now suggestions of a secret life are emerging. He was having an affair. The woman speaking out to the Denver Post, calling him a liar. She says the 2 began a physical relationship in early July and saw each other 4 to 5 times a week.
And so he's basically created 2 worlds, and he's decided he's going to get rid of one of them because it's now a burden.
Watts and his wife Shanann appeared to be the picture-perfect family living in Colorado. They had a baby on the way. In social media videos, Watts played the part of loving husband and doting father to Bella and Celeste. But back in August, that story of suburban bliss began to unravel when Watts' pregnant wife and daughters went missing.
His interview, first of all, it's very flat. It's unemotional. He spends a lot of the time rocking back and forth, and he also holds himself like I'm doing right now. That's a defensive posture. That's saying, I'm not going to let you in. I'm going to control what I'm going to say.
That Tuesday night, Watts goes to visit friends Amanda and Nick Thayer. They spoke with my colleague, Clayton Sandell.
Did it ever cross your mind to even ask him if he was involved in the disappearance of his own family?
We admitted, this doesn't look good for Chris.
Then on Wednesday, everything changed with this bombshell.
A heartbreaking outcome to the story we have been tracking all week, the confession of a father.
Late Wednesday night, Watts is arrested. By Thursday, police are at the oil fields where Watts used to work. They find 3 bodies. Shanann's in a shallow grave. The bodies of Bella and Celeste submerged for days in oil tanks. Just days ago, the woman who Chris Watts was having an affair with spoke to the Denver Post, telling the paper he's a liar. He lied about everything. According to Nicole Kessinger, Watts wooed her into an idyllic romance after he introduced himself to her at work. She noticed that he didn't wear a wedding ring, allegedly telling her he was separated and at the end of the divorce proceedings. But that persona unraveled right before her eyes when news reports announced Watts' family had disappeared, and Watts presented himself to the world as a happily married man, begging for his family's return. Kessinger telling the Denver Post, "I found out he was still married and his wife was 15 weeks pregnant, thinking if he was able to lie to me and hide something that big, what else was he lying about?" Kessinger reportedly went to the police, who eventually arrested Watts.
The inexplicable nature of what he did is you can't understand it.
He wants a girlfriend. He wants a life that's free and easy without all the complications and the financial entanglements of a typical family life. And so that's how you get from a picture of one thing to a reality of another.
And this is his actual handwritten love letter. "The first day I saw you, you took my breath away. The first time we kissed, I knew I had met the most amazing, unique, and electric woman ever." He signed it, "Love, Chris."
Life in the Colorado Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole.
Watts was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms earlier this month. According to the documents, Watts was smitten with Kessinger. He used Google to search when to say "I love you" for first time. She seems just as smitten, Googling "man I'm having affair with says he will leave his wife." Watts' wife, Shanann, suspected that her husband was cheating. She complained he was ignoring her and texted him, "Think you're with another girl," or worse. 4 days before the murders, Shanann, who was 4 months pregnant, became more distraught, texting a friend she had canceled a gender reveal party. Chris said, "We are not compatible anymore." He refused to hug me. What the hell changed? He said he'd had time to think. "I'm so sorry. I've cried myself to sleep for over a week now." Chris Watts' mistress, Nicole Kessinger, says he claimed he was in the final stages of an amicable divorce, telling the Denver Post, "I believed him."
She met Watts at work in June. That in July, he said to her that his divorce was final. Kessinger said they had a 2-month relationship. But the day that Shanann and the girls vanished, Kessinger says Watts was texting her, seeming calm as he told her that the mom and daughters never came back from a play date. Remember, this is what he was telling the media at the same time. Kessinger says, quote, "I was very confused why the media was at his house. When I read the news, I found out he was still married. His wife was 15 weeks pregnant. It got to a point that he was telling me so many lies that I eventually told him that I did not want to speak to him again until his family was found," unquote. She adds, quote, "I don't think there is a logical explanation for what he did. It's a senseless act and it's horrific," unquote.
Go, Cece. Go, Bella.
Boy, play, girls, win.
You're so smart. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.